Hi everyone. When I look back at my years as a Jehovah's Witness, as a regular publisher, as an auxiliary pioneer, and as a pioneer, and I think about qualifications for teaching, I can only blush. What did I know? What did I study? I knew a handful of proof texts, and I studied Watchtower publications. I was not a well-read person. I was not a wide reader, and I can't even say that I was a thorough Bible reader as a witness. I'm going to read you from Victor Shepard's book, Cloud of Witnesses, A Great Cloud of Witnesses. His little bio on Francis Asbury, who lived from 1745 to 1816. As he embarked for America in 1771, the 26-year-old wrote in his journal, "Whither am I going? To the New World. What to do? To gain honor? To get money? No. I am going to live to God and to bring others to do so." Francis Asbury grew up in the Birmingham area of England, where Methodist flourished, as it customarily did, wherever the human ravages of the Industrial Revolution were worse. Only 2 years before Asbury's birth, nearby Wednesbury had seen dreadful riots, memories of which would be healed wholly only in heaven. Homes had been pillaged, shops looted, bodies broken, women raped. For more than a century, Methodists in this area would preserve hacked furniture as a tribute to the courage and sacrifice of their foreparents in faith. An intellectually gifted boy, Asbury was set upon so viciously at school that he had to be withdrawn, only to become servant to a vulgar, affluent family whose riches were matched by their ungodliness. Escape was provided when he was taken on elsewhere as an apprentice metalworker. When he was 16, Asbury became aware of a deeper work of grace within him, and he began to preach, speaking up to 5 times per week, walking several miles to get to each appointment. In order both to preach and to retain his livelihood, he found it necessary to rise at 4 o'clock in the morning and retire at midnight, a practice he employed for the rest of his life. His abilities, widely known now, were assigned to assist James Glassbrook, himself a forceful Methodist minister. Glassbrook had been a traveling companion to John Wesley, and no doubt informed his protege of what had befallen him and Wesley in their roving together. For instance, an Irish magistrate had flailed vindictively at Glassbrook with his walking stick until he had broken it over the minister's arm. He was irate that the latter had protected Wesley against a mob which the magistrate himself had incited. Meanwhile, help was needed desperately in America. In 1771, Wesley challenged, "Who will go?" His word became the word of the Lord as Asbury stepped forward. 4 affectionate sisters, as they described themselves, wrote his mother of their dismay at this turn of events. His last service on English soil found him preaching on Psalm 61. "From the end of the earth I will cry unto thee." In no time he reflected the practicality of American life, putting himself behind himself I have to read that again. In no time he reflected the practicality of American life, putting behind him the old world's concern for pretentious titles and social position. Concerning slave owners who would not free black serfs, he announced without hesitation, God will depart from them. A minister was someone who did the work of the ministry and was manifestly used of God in that work. To forsake the ministry for a less rigorous job and expect to retain the title of reverend was ridiculous. Ordination at the hands of the church conferred nothing. It merely acknowledged that someone had been ordained at God's hand already. At the same time, Asbury was upset at the scarcity of qualified preachers, and startled that many without qualification assumed that none was needed. Like Wesley before him, Asbury insisted that those claiming a call to preach must study 5 hours per day or return to shop and farm. When resisted by older ministers whose ardor had diminished and who preferred to minister amidst comfort, Asbury stated, I have nothing to seek but the glory of God, nothing to fear but his displeasure. I am determined that no man shall bias me with soft words and fair speeches. He sought no comfort for himself as he preached everywhere. A widow's rented room, a tavern, a cabin filthy as a stable, an orchard, a paper mill, before a crowd at a public hanging, or a wagon carrying men to their execution. When many Methodist clergy left America during the Revolutionary War, Asbury remained and never renounced his British citizenship. In 1784, Wesley named him superintendent of the entire Methodist work in America. Yet Asbury realized that old-world authoritarianism had no place in the new. He had his colleagues elect him superintendent, a clear indication that ministry in the New World needed new wineskins. Superintendent was translated bishop in America, a title Wesley opposed inasmuch as it suggested spiritual sterility, worldly pomp, and a measure of wealth inexcusable in any Christian. Asbury's work took him far afield. He crossed the Allegheny Mountains 60 times, often through trackless underbrush. No house provided shelter at night. His rheumatism worsened by repeated drenchings and cold winds, left his feet grotesquely swollen. Someone would lift him onto a horse, or onto his horse, his dangling feet unable to get through the stirrups. Incapacitated as well by asthma and pleurisy in the last 2 years of his life, he had to be carried like a child everywhere. When urged to give up traveling, he replied that "come" had always been the operative word he used with younger preachers, never "go." He loved the younger ministers and his family, naming them aloud before God in anguished prayer, interceding for them in view of the suffering they could not avoid. Under his leadership, Methodism had grown from 5,000 members in 1776 to 214,000 at his death. Little wonder that in 1787, a letter addressed to the Reverend Bishop Asbury, North America, had found its way to him. When reminded that he was unable to stand up to preach for the last 7 years of his ministry, only one of the hardships he had endured for the sake of the kingdom, he replied, "But what of this? I can trust in nothing I have done or suffered. I stand alone in the righteousness of Christ." I did want to reread a small section here of Victor's comments about Asbury. Said, Asbury was upset at the scarcity of qualified preachers and startled that many without qualification assumed that none was needed. Like Wesley before him, Asbury insisted that those claiming a call to preach must study 5 hours per day or return to shop and farm. Ignorance may be bliss, but only for the ignorant, not for those they have to communicate with. At best, it can be frustrating, but at worst, it can be deadly. Some may disparage this kind of study as being interest in head knowledge and being fleshly. But in all three of the synoptic gospels, Christ repeats, "You must love God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind," as the first and greatest commandment. That's in Matthew 22, verse 37, Mark 12, verse 30, and Luke 10, verse 27. When Jesus was being tempted in the wilderness, in the account in Matthew 4, 3 times he is challenged by the devil, and in his responses he says, "It is written." And he quotes from Deuteronomy in all 3 cases. How many of us have mastered Deuteronomy that we could do that? This is in Matthew chapter 4, verses 4, 7, and 10, where you get his response, "It is written." And he quotes from Deuteronomy chapter 8 and Deuteronomy chapter 6, 2 times from chapter 6. We also have the example of the Bereans in Acts 17, verses 10 and 11, and they are said to be noble-minded. Why? It reads, "As soon as it was night, the brothers sent Paul and Silas away to Berea. On arriving there, they went to the Jewish synagogue. Now the Bereans were of more noble character than the Thessalonians, for they received the message with great eagerness and examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true." I'm going to link to a video of David's that gives his testimony of leaving, and he says, "How I landed softly." And he gives, he's reading from his own testimony, a PDF of it, where he lists at least 100 teachers that have blessed Christians through the centuries. If you want a copy of that, just send us an email and we can send that to you. The second video is one that David did based on the work of Griffith Thomas, and it is called, "We Must Be Very Careful in Bible Study. God's Word is for us, but not to us, nor always about us."